Who is the fighter of the year in 2024? Alex Pereira or Ilia Topuria? They're the only two options. There's no one else. It pretty much just comes down to quantity versus quality. Alex Pereira has more wins in the year, more title defenses, more title wins in general. Fought 3 times in a span of like half a year, which is crazy, right? He broke the record for 3 title defenses in a row in 175 days and got knockout wins in all of them. He defeated Jamal Hill, Yuri Prochazka, and Khalil Roundtree. Ilia Topuria, though, has the quality of wins against 2 all-time great fighters, 2 of the greatest featherweights of all time, in my opinion, top 10 GOATs of the sport. Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway knocked out both of them, the only fighter to ever knock out Holloway. So that's pretty much what it comes down to, is quantity versus quality. Do you pick the fighter that has more wins, more title wins, more knockouts against lesser competition, or do you pick the fighter that has less wins, less knockouts, but against much better competition? Both won in spectacular fashion in all of their fights, right? Alex's knockout at UFC 300 against Jamal Hill was insane. First round, left hook, and Jamal Hill has been sleepwalking ever since with the crazy stuff he's been saying about Alex and his opponents. He knocked out Yuri Prochazka in the rematch. They knocked out Khalil Roundtree, who was lower ranked, but he performed way better, and I think is a better fighter than maybe Jamal Hill, or at least around that same kind of skill level. Ilia Topuria knocked out Alexander Volkanovski earlier in the year. Now, Volk is one of the best fighters we've ever seen in the sport when you talk about skill level, how technical he is, and what he's done in the sport. An absolute legend, one of the greatest of all time. None of Alex's wins are against anybody who rivals Volkanovski or Holloway in any fashion. But Volkanovski was coming off a knockout loss to Islam Makhachev, so there is some context there. But I still don't think any version of Volk would have taken that punch. And Ilia Topuria kind of confirmed that. He knocked out Max Holloway. If he's knocking out Max Holloway, there is no way any version of Alexander Volkanovski, whether it's the Volk that fought Islam the first time, whether it's Volk that fought Yair Rodriguez or Max Holloway in the third fight, no version of Volk would have survived that punch. So even though it wasn't the best Volkanovski, when it comes to his durability, it doesn't matter. I don't think Volk would have ever beaten Ilia Topuria in that fight. And even still, that version of Volkanovski is far better than anybody that Alex Pereira has beaten in 2024. Then we look at the Max Holloway fight. He beat Max Holloway in his prime. Now, there is something to say about him jumping up and down weight classes, but even still, that's been a thing about Max before, right? He's done that before, and he's looked amazing in almost every single one of his fights. He's always had a hard weight cut. He always looks drained. The fans and the commentators and everybody always talks about how Max looks awful during his weight cuts, but he usually performs. So we can't use that as an excuse when finally he gets knocked out. So Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway are better fighters, bigger wins than any win that Alex has this year. That's why I pick Ilia Topuria as the fighter of the year over Alex Pereira. I value quality over quantity. Yes, Alex was injured in some of his fights and he took him on short notice and all of that stuff, but just the level of competition doesn't even come close. It's not that you can't even compare them that well. They don't even come close. With him beating Yuri Prochazka as his best win this year, and Ilia knocked out Volk and Holloway. Again, Volk and Holloway are top 10 greatest fighters of all time. Not just in their weight classes, of all time, ever in the sport, in any weight class. Yuri Prochazka isn't even one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time, let alone across all weight classes. None of those guys that Alex beat are. Like, the level of competition is so vastly different. There's such a big gap from the fighters that Ilia beat to the fighters that Alex beat. I mean, Ilia Topuria has some of the biggest wins in the sport's history. Imagine beating Volkanovski and Max Holloway in the same year. He did it back to back. He got 2 of the biggest wins ever in the sport, back-to-back knockouts. If you beat a top 10 great, that's one of the biggest, notable wins in the sport. You're beating, some of the greatest fighters of all time. Alex didn't do that besides the Adesanya win, which wasn't this year, right? And other than going up to lightweight, Ilia's probably never going to get as big of a win that beat Max and Volkanovski. If he beats Diego Lopez or Movsar Evloev or Arnold Allen, these are never going to be as big of a win than him starching Volkanovski and Holloway. He already got the 2 biggest wins of his career at the start of his title reign. Those wins are so big that the only way he could top those is if he goes up to lightweight and beats Islam Makhachev. That's how big those wins are. Alex could top his wins by beating Ankalaev or Jan Blachowicz again. He can top his wins by beating fighters in the same weight class. Ilia cannot. The equivalent of Ilia Topuria beating Volkanovski and Holloway is like if Alex Pereira beat John Jones and Daniel Cormier or something like that, something equivalent to that. He beat some of the greatest fighters ever in the featherweight division. Alex has not. Yuri Prochazka is not even top 10 greatest light heavyweights of all time. It might not even be top 15, and that's the best guy Alex beat this year. When you think of the greatest light heavyweights, you think of John Jones, Daniel Cormier, Chuck Liddell, Alexander Gustafsson, Anthony Rumble Johnson, Rampage, Shogun, Lyoto, Glover, Alex, Vanderlei. Even Forrest Griffin might be greater than Yuri. Dan Henderson, Vitor, Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz. Like, when you think about it, you have to have Ilia Topuria as the fighter of the year. The quality of his wins trump the quantity of Alex Pereira's wins. And the thing is, Alex only has one more win. Ilia has 2 wins this year. Alex has 3. It's not like he has 4 or 5 wins, which would have been much bigger for him, you know? It's not that big of a difference. I think the quality at that point wins Ilia Topuria the fighter of the year in 2024. And Ilia Topuria is ranked number 4 pound for pound. He didn't move anywhere in the rankings. Still below John Jones somehow. I don't understand that. Jones has 1 win in how many years? Jones' last wins are Cyril Gane, Dominic Reyes, which he arguably lost, and Thiago Santos, which was a very close fight. Ilia beat Volkanovski and Holloway. There is no way Jones is above Ilia in the current pound-for-pound rankings. In fact, I don't even think John Jones is in the top 5. You can't have him in the top 5. He's just not fighting enough. I would have Ilia at number 2. I think Islam Makhachev should still be above him. Right, I think Islam is the best fighter in the world, and Ilia is number 2. Sure, with all the title fights and defenses and going up weight classes for Alex Pereira could put him at number 2, but when you look at the skills, when you look at the well-roundedness, it just doesn't seem right to not have Ilia at number 2 above Alex. He's more well-rounded, he's better on the ground, he's a better boxer, not a kickboxer, but a better boxer. He has better footwork, just overall the more skilled fighter that could do a lot more than Alex can, right? Alex is one of the best kickboxers we've ever seen, but he's going up against a level of competition that really isn't grappling with him as much. Yuri grappled with him in the first fight, and Jan Blachowicz did in their fight as well. Ilia Topuria is going up against fighters who can do pretty much everything. Besides Max, who kickboxes for the most part, and is arguably better than any striker that Alex Pereira has fought, arguably with maybe Israel Adesanya. But I do think that Max is a better striker than Adesanya, which may be a hot take, but certainly better than every other striker that Alex has fought so far. And also a better grappler than most of the fighters that Alex has fought. Then you look at Volkanovski. Volk is better than everybody that Alex has fought. Even someone like Josh Emmett is better than most of the opponents that Alex has fought. Even though he's never been champion, but champion standards is a bit conflated in this sport. The light heavyweight division has the opportunity to have all these different kind of champions, especially when there isn't a dominant champion around. The featherweight division has had some of the best champions in UFC history. I mean, think about it. The worst champion in featherweight history was Conor McGregor. That's insane, because Conor was very high level. You had Jose Aldo, you had Max Holloway, Volkanovski, and now Ilia Topuria. You have some of the greatest fighters of all time that were champions in that same weight class. So guys like Josh Emmett and other contenders, they weren't able to bounce the belt between each other like the light heavyweight division did for years. You look at Yuri and Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, like they don't compare. I don't even think they're as good as Josh Emmett, to be honest. Even though those guys were champions, but just look at the skills, right? If you look at the skills, I think Emmett is a better fighter than those guys. He has better wrestling than all of them. He's more technical in the striking than some of them. And he has so much punching power for the weight class. Legitimately a one-punch knockout artist in the featherweight division is absolutely insane. Better footwork than all of those guys by a long shot. Like Khalil Roundtree and Yuri's footwork don't come close to Josh Emmett's, let alone talking about Jamal Hill's footwork. That is why I have to have Ilia Topuria as the number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I can see Alex at number 3, but there is some competition when you talk about Alexander Pantoja and Dricus du Plessis and Tom Aspinall. Like, these guys are closer, I think, to Alex than Ilia Topuria is. I think Islam and Ilia are in a league of their own. They're the 2 best fighters in the UFC, and they're like in the same tier. So that's my opinion on the best fighters in the world right now and who the fighter of the year should be. I think Ilia's number 2 in the world, and he should be the fighter of the year. And maybe next year or the year after, we might get the number 1 and number 2 pound-for-pound fighters fighting each other. Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria. Definitely not next, right? Ilia should have a couple more title defenses before he moves out to lightweight, but that would be probably the highest skilled fight of all time, which is crazy because Islam versus Volk is regarded as the highest skilled fight ever. And if he could beat that with Ilia Topuria and he wins that fight, I mean, how do you not consider Islam Makhachev one of the greatest fighters of all time at that point?